What happens when a Filipina flight attendant is mocked by wealthy passengers, only to show them that there's more to her than meets the eye? How will they react when a life or death situation forces them to rely on her quick thinking and calm leadership? Watch as arrogance meets humility in this unforgettable story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring content. The morning rush at Los Angeles International Airport was like any other, a wave of travelers weaving through the terminal, their footsteps quickening as they hustled to catch their flights. The steady hum of rolling luggage filled the air, competing with the announcements echoing across the terminal, reminding passengers of gate changes, boarding times, and the usual pre-flight reminders. The air was thick with urgency, the energy palpable as the airport buzzed with activity. Among the many faces, Isabella Reyes moved gracefully through the crowd, a sense of calm radiating from her despite the chaos around her. Dressed in a navy blue flight attendant uniform, her lapel gleaming with a golden insignia, she exuded an air of professionalism and competence. As she approached the gate area, her eyes scanned the passengers, ready to assist with any last-minute needs. She was no stranger to this fast-paced environment, having spent over a decade in the aviation industry. What many didn't know was that Isabella Reyes was more than just a flight attendant. She was the CEO of the airline that owned this bustling terminal. Isabella's career had begun long ago, on the other side of the service counter, as a young flight attendant eager to make her mark. She'd started as an entry-level employee, handling the day-to-day tasks that many never saw, the long hours, the constant interaction with passengers, the unsung efforts that went into ensuring each flight ran smoothly. Through dedication and perseverance, she rose through the ranks, eventually earning the prestigious title of CEO. Yet, despite her high position, Isabella remained grounded. She didn't wear her title as a shield. She often donned her old uniform, stepping into the role of a flight attendant, not for the prestige but for the connection it allowed her to maintain with the team and the passengers she served. As Isabella walked through the gate area, her calm, composed demeanor stood in stark contrast to the hurried chaos of the terminal. She was the epitome of professionalism, someone who had seamlessly blended humility with success. Isabella glanced up as she approached the front desk, her calm expression never betraying the slight tension she felt. A small group of passengers stood in the VIP lounge, their voices rising above the hum of the airport. Isabella couldn't help but overhear their conversation, the mockery lacing their words sharp and deliberate. "Look at that," one of the men sneered, his voice carrying across the lounge. "She must be desperate for tips. I mean, look at her, so eager to please. You'd think she's still trying to get ahead." The others chuckled, their eyes scanning Isabella's uniform with thinly veiled judgment. The comment was aimed directly at her, but Isabella didn't flinch. She'd heard worse in her time, especially during her early years in the industry. It was the kind of remark she'd learned to ignore, something that came with the territory when you worked in service, no matter how high you climbed in your career. With a composed smile, she focused on the passengers at the gate, making sure everything ran smoothly. She couldn't afford to let their disdain cloud her focus. As passengers lined up to board, Isabella ensured that their boarding passes were checked and that the entire process proceeded without delay. But her eyes occasionally darted back toward the group, who seemed intent on making their presence known with their haughty demeanor. Their behavior didn't stop with mockery. As they boarded the plane, their entitled attitudes grew even more pronounced. One woman, with her expensive sunglasses perched atop her nose, raised a hand to summon one of the junior attendants. "Excuse me," she called, her tone dripping with impatience. "The meal options here are absolutely dreadful. I want a gourmet meal. Something with real flavor, not whatever this place has to offer. Another passenger, a man in an immaculate suit, waved his hand dismissively. I don't care for the wine selection either. You should have better options in business class. Do you even know what you're serving us? Isabella overheard their demands, and though irritation began to gnaw at her, she knew better than to let it show. She walked over, her voice even and polite. Good afternoon, sir. I'll make sure your request is taken care of. Please allow me a moment. Though she remained professional inside, she couldn't help but feel a sting from their arrogance. Yet, Isabella had long learned that staying calm and composed was her power. Their insults wouldn't break her, and in time, they would see the value of genuine leadership, even if they didn't realize it just yet. As the passengers boarded the aircraft, Isabella moved smoothly through the aisles, assisting each one with a friendly smile, ensuring their comfort as they stowed their bags in the overhead compartments. She greeted them warmly, focusing on making the boarding process as smooth as possible. However, she couldn't help but notice the group of wealthy passengers who continued to make their presence known with their entitled attitudes. One of the men, dressed in an expensive suit, sneered as he passed Isabella. He looked her up and down, his voice low but loud enough for her to hear. Typical of these people. All they're good for is serving us. Isabella's composure remained unshaken, though the words stung. She had heard similar insults before, but she knew better than to react. She'd worked her way up from a flight attendant to the CEO of the airline, and this kind of behavior was nothing new. She simply nodded and continued her work, keeping her focus on ensuring the smooth flow of passengers. Once the plane was in the air, the group's entitled behavior became even more evident. The woman sitting next to the man who had mocked Isabella earlier raised her hand to summon a junior attendant. It's far too hot in here, she said sharply. You people should know how to manage the air conditioning. Isabella noticed the attendant's nervous glance and gave a subtle nod of reassurance. Walking over, she addressed the woman's complaint with a calm, professional tone. I apologize for the discomfort, ma'am. I'll have someone adjust the temperature for you. The woman rolled her eyes but accepted the response, and Isabella moved on to tend to other passengers. As she walked away, she overheard the woman muttering to her companion, "This is what you get when you fly with low-cost airlines." Meanwhile, the man who had insulted her earlier waved his glass of wine in the air. "This is awful," he complained loudly. "Do you even know what quality wine is?" Isabella, who had been listening from a distance, approached with a composed smile. "Let me bring you another glass, sir. I'll make sure it's to your liking." She took the glass from him and walked away, doing her best to keep her irritation in check. As the flight continued, the group's demands grew more unreasonable. One man snapped his fingers at a younger flight attendant, dismissing her efforts to serve him. "This isn't cold enough. Bring me something better." Isabella, sensing the rising tension, stepped in, speaking to him in her calm, steady voice. "Sir, I'll personally handle that for you." Despite her professionalism, the atmosphere in the cabin was becoming tense. The group's behavior was causing discomfort for the other passengers. Isabella could feel the weight of their actions in the air, but she continued to manage the situation, maintaining the smooth flow of the flight as best as she could. Inside, however, Isabella felt the frustration building. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but this group's sense of entitlement was different. They weren't just asking for service, they were treating everyone around them as beneath them. Isabella couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for them to realize the consequences of their arrogance. The flight wasn't over, and the lesson was yet to come. The flight had been smooth, the hum of the engines filling the cabin as passengers settled into their seats. Isabella walked the aisles, checking on the comfort of everyone, when suddenly a loud thud broke the calm. Her eyes darted toward the sound, her heart skipping a beat. A man from the group of entitled passengers had collapsed in the aisle, his face pale and his body unmoving. Panic swept through the business class section. Several of his companions screamed for help. "Somebody help! He's not breathing!" One of them shouted, their voice laced with fear. The cabin was filled with chaos, but Isabella's reaction was calm and measured. She immediately rushed toward the man, her training kicking in as she knelt beside him. His skin was cold and clammy, his breathing shallow. His friends were frantic, shouting for assistance but paralyzed by the gravity of the situation. Isabella's presence, however, was composed and confident. She quickly assessed the situation. "Call for medical assistance on board," she instructed one of the junior attendants. "Bring the first aid kit and make sure the area is clear." As the crew scrambled to respond, Isabella took control of the situation. She kept her hands on the man's chest, feeling his heartbeat. He wasn't responding and his pulse was faint. Isabella moved with precision, administering oxygen and positioning him to keep his airways clear. Her mind focused solely on the man's condition. She needed to act quickly. The group of passengers had stopped shouting but stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock. The earlier mockery had vanished, replaced by genuine fear. One of the men who had earlier made a cruel remark about Isabella's role leaned forward with wide eyes, asking in a shaky voice, "What's happening? What can we do to help?" Isabella didn't glance up but spoke firmly, her voice steady. "Stay calm. You can help by staying out of the way." She didn't need distractions. Isabella's team of attendants had responded quickly, each member focused on their task. Within moments, one of the other attendants returned with the first aid kit. Isabella quickly took over, directing the team to apply the necessary equipment. Another flight attendant retrieved a defibrillator, but before it could be used, the passenger's pulse began to stabilize. Isabella kept her focus, her hands steady as she adjusted the oxygen mask, her voice soothing but authoritative. "Breathe deeply, sir," she murmured, hoping that he would regain consciousness. The man's chest rose and fell with more regularity now. His skin began to regain some color, and he was starting to breathe on his own. After a few tense minutes, Isabella stood back slightly, her breath steady. The man wasn't out of danger yet, but he was stable. She nodded at the attendants to keep monitoring him and checked to ensure he was properly supported. As the room settled into a calmer rhythm, Isabella noticed the passengers in the group staring at her, their faces now filled with awe. The arrogance and mockery had vanished, replaced by disbelief. One of the women, still wide-eyed, muttered to the others, she saved him." Isabella knew the moment had come. The realization was dawning on them. One of the men, still shaken, stammered, "Wait a minute, you're not just a flight attendant, are you?" Isabella didn't immediately answer. She turned back to the now stabilized passenger and made sure he was being looked after. When she finally turned toward the group, she replied simply, "No, I'm not. I'm the CEO of this airline." The silence in the cabin was deafening. The group stood there in stunned disbelief, unable to comprehend what they had just learned. The woman who had earlier made the most cutting remarks about Isabella's role looked stricken. "You're the CEO," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Isabella didn't offer further explanation. Her calm smile was the only answer they needed. She had saved the life of the man who had mocked her, and now the entire group understood who they had been dealing with all along. The transformation in the group was immediate. The arrogance that had once defined them was gone, replaced by embarrassment and a newfound respect for the woman they had so callously dismissed. It wasn't just her title they now saw, it was her strength, her leadership, and her calm under pressure. Isabella had taught them a lesson that none of them would soon forget. The tension in the cabin gradually lifted as the man who had collapsed was safely attended to. His condition was now stable, and the crew had ensured that the situation had been brought under control. While others on the flight resumed their activities, Isabella maintained her calm professionalism, ensuring everything returned to normal. But it was clear that things had shifted, not just in the cabin, but in the way the passengers viewed her. The group of wealthy passengers who had earlier mocked her now sat quietly, their earlier arrogance replaced by discomfort. Their eyes, once filled with disdain, now showed a hint of guilt. They had judged Isabella based solely on her appearance and position, dismissing her without a second thought. But now they saw her in a new light, one that made them reconsider their earlier behavior. Isabella continued to walk through the aisles, checking on the other passengers and tending to their needs. Her poise remained unshaken, but there was a sense of recognition in the air. She had handled the situation calmly, saving the life of one of the very people who had belittled her moments before. Her actions spoke louder than any title or position could. Before long, one of the men from the group stood up, his expression more somber than Isabella had ever seen. He walked toward her, looking both nervous and regretful. As he approached, he cleared his throat and after a brief pause spoke. "Miss Reyes," he began, his voice noticeably softer, I owe you an apology. What you did back there, saving his life, was more than any of us expected. You were incredible." Isabella paused, meeting his gaze, her expression calm. "It's my job," she said simply, but her voice carried an underlying warmth. The man took a deep breath and continued. "No, it's more than that. We misjudged you. We thought we knew who you were, but we were wrong. We judged you based on your role, your appearance, and we were completely out of line." Another man, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. "I've been flying for years, and I've never seen someone handle a crisis like that. You didn't panic, and you kept your head when all of us were losing ours. You're a true leader, not just a flight attendant." The group, now standing as a unit, nodded in agreement, their expressions filled with genuine remorse. They had been so quick to look down on her, so eager to mock her because of her job, but now they realized how wrong they had been. Isabella hadn't just saved a life, she had shown them what real strength and leadership looked like. "We're sorry," said the woman who had been the most critical earlier. "We misjudged you, and we shouldn't have treated you that way. You've taught us something important today." Isabella nodded in acknowledgement but didn't respond immediately. She had accepted their apology, but her focus remained on what mattered most, the lesson that had been learned. "Respect isn't earned by titles or appearances," she said quietly. "It's earned through actions and how we treat each other." As she walked away to continue her duties, the group remained in thoughtful silence. The change in their attitudes was profound. They had learned that true strength wasn't about wealth or status, but about integrity, compassion, and leadership. The lessons of humility and respect would stay with them long after the flight was over. As the flight neared its destination, the once tense atmosphere in the cabin had completely shifted. The passengers who had once dismissed Isabella now sat with a new sense of humility. She continued her duties, moving between aisles with grace, attending to passengers as if nothing had changed, yet the change in the air was palpable. It wasn't just the smooth service that set Isabella apart. It was the strength of character she demonstrated in the face of adversity. The earlier emergency had revealed something far more profound than her role as a flight attendant. It had shown that leadership wasn't about holding power, but about how you responded to others, how you served them, especially when they needed you most. Isabella had proven that leadership could be defined by care, calmness, and unwavering focus during a crisis, qualities that had earned her not only the respect of the passengers but their admiration. The passengers, particularly the ones who had mocked her earlier, now realized how wrong they had been. They had based their judgment on superficial assumptions, thinking her worth was defined by her uniform, her job title, or her background. Yet, when it mattered most, Isabella's actions spoke volumes about who she really was. The strength she had shown in handling the medical emergency had shattered their assumptions and replaced them with respect. As the plane began its descent, Isabella continued her work with the same poise she had shown throughout the flight. It wasn't about recognition for her. What mattered to her was that the passengers had learned a crucial lesson. The passengers, who had once looked at her through a lens of entitlement and condescension, were now seeing her for who she truly was, a leader, not because of her title, but because of her integrity and actions. The group of passengers stood up as the plane landed, clapping not just for the safe arrival but for the woman who had proven that leadership wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned through respect, humility, and the ability to keep calm under pressure. They had seen Isabella's leadership in action, and it had transformed the way they viewed not only her but others like her. Isabella stood quietly as the applause filled the cabin. She didn't seek recognition, but the genuine gratitude from the passengers was a reward in itself. She had shown them that true strength came not from titles or authority, but from the quiet strength of character. Leadership, she knew, was about treating others with respect and care, especially in difficult situations. As passengers began to leave, many stopped to thank her. Some expressed admiration for the way she had handled the situation. Others confessed that they had learned the importance of respecting people regardless of their position. Isabella responded with a warm smile, acknowledging their words, but she knew the most important lesson had been learned, that respect, humility, and leadership were built from actions, not assumptions. Her leadership had not been about power. It was about genuine care and kindness. And that lesson, she hoped, would stay with them long after they left the plane,